Welcome to another OU Insider Under the Visor Sooners pregame podcast powered by Jani-King.
Jani-King, folks, is the greatest team to ever clean and a proud partner of OU Athletics as well. They can deliver spotless results from stadiums to any size business across the country. So, for unbeatable commercial cleaning services, you can visit Jani-King.com, Janiking.com to check them out. Jani-King, once again, the greatest team to ever clean and the presenting sponsor of the OU Insider Under the Visor podcast. I am Parker Thune. You heard from Brandon Drum already. The third member of our crew is none other than Grill Boy, Travis Davidson. And gentlemen, I will be completely honest with you. It has been a while since my outlook going into an Oklahoma football game was this cynical. And that's probably the best word, is cynical.
Yeah. I'm not worried about the defense. I know the defense is going to do their thing. They may give up, 12, 13. I think maybe a couple touchdowns, right? Like that somebody had to drive the full length of the field to score, that's okay. You'll take that, right? But the problem is the short fields, the field position game that Oklahoma continually loses is not going to help the defense and do them any favors. So when you only have to drive the 55 yards instead of 85 yards, people 75, 70, 60 yards, that makes a huge difference in the grand scheme of it. There's a reason why they say it's a game of inches. And
Is Oklahoma losing the field position battle, though?
The first quarter, they always seem to have really good field position. And then after that, it feels like Oklahoma plays on their side of the field offensively quite a bit. And they play on their side of the field, or the opposing side of the field, in the first quarter because the defense always comes out hot and makes a play or does something to keep the offense within short distance. They just can't capitalize on it, and eventually it starts to move to the other side of the field, and it never comes back across for some odd reason. Probably the offense. I don't know. Call me crazy. Travis, anything?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because Brent Venables came under fire for his comments post-game that said, I'm disappointed in the defense, to which everybody was like, what do you mean? I thought you were going to fire Seth Luttrell in this press conference. What are you talking about? And just we're like, Brent Venables has lost the team. He's delusional. He doesn't know what he's seeing. It's time for him to go, blah, blah, blah. And after sleeping on it, I was like, I think it's just relative to expectations because he knows what the Oklahoma offense is. He knows that this team has to lean on defense, create opportunities for the offense, short fields for the offense, and then they've got to execute at minimum, make your field goals and don't turn the ball over. Unfortunately, they didn't do those two things against Texas. That's what buried them early, especially that second quarter. You give up 21 points in a matter of what felt like a minute and a half. You're gonna lose a game. So I think with 2 minutes and 27 seconds left, something like that, it was a 7-3 game, and Oklahoma stood to get the ball after halftime. And even after missing a field goal, you're like, all right, at least we're in it. Like, you can take some momentum into the halftime locker room. But I think why Brent Venables was so disappointed with the defense is he knew he had to lean on them. And when he leaned on them, they snapped like a twig. And that was the problem. Sure tacklers like Robert Spears-Jennings and Billy Bowman looked silly out there. And I mean, they would be the first ones to tell you that. Billy Bowman gets put on skates. RSJ slides down Quintravion like a fireman's pole on the way to his second touchdown. Billy takes bad angles twice. Like, it was a rough day for the safeties and the tackling. And that's what's been so crazy is the tackling has been so sure, right? And I know a lot of people laugh at PFF, but RSJ was rated as the best defensive player in the country at one point. And he's sliding off of running backs when he's got them dead to rights. Billy Bowman is literally cartoon banana peel slipping by defenders as they get to the end zone or as they make their cut. I mean, the Oklahoma run defense is the one thing you felt that you could hang your hat on going into that game. We talked about it on the pregame pod.
Oh,
You
yeah.
should be able to hang your hat on the Oklahoma run defense. And let me finish.
Yeah, no. Go ahead.
Travion, 9.1 yards per attempt. They gained more yards by handing it off per attempt to Trey Wisner than they did attempting passes with Quinn Ewers to a bunch of NFL wide receivers and an absolute NFL tight end. Gunnar Helm is a dude. So that's the problem is Brent Venables looked at a run defense that he's seen all year, give up 3.3 yards a carry, 3.1, 1.9, and really be like, if Oklahoma's going to win, they need to lean on what they've been leaning on all year, a run defense, and they just fell flat on their face. And I think that's where Brent is looking as his disappointment was the one people I feel like I could rely on let me down.
Yeah, I thought all what you said. I thought everything. Shortly after the game, I was like, I was mad about how he said the defense. I think we all were. And then a couple days later, you kind of rewatch some things and you see some things and you find out some things. So first thing, that RSJ thing on that play where he comes in late and then he misses a tackle on the same play, right? Talking to a source that was pretty directly, and they said that he was getting his butt chewed out by a coach. And that's why he wasn't in there, because the coach was literally chewing him out and didn't realize what was going on. So he had to run in there late. So he's all discombobulated to begin with. Well, then you compound, which again, OU's losing that game no matter what. So this isn't an excuse, but I'm throwing facts out there. You go back, you watch. Woody Washington, I think, had the worst day, just getting blocked in the back the whole game. So, I mean, those 2 touchdowns, that poor dude is there to make the tackle. And at both times, the ref looks over at him and he goes flying out of the screen with a dude shoving him directly in the back, which is, it's a penalty in 9 times out of 10, but it doesn't matter because the offense wasn't going to score. Texas could have kicked 3 field goals and OU's losing that ball game no matter what, or 2 field goals, as a matter of fact, and they're losing that ball game. So that's not an excuse. That's just stating a fact. I think what makes it worse is that Billy Bowman came walking off the bus saying they ain't ready for us. They ain't ready for this. They ain't ready for that. No, and I'm making a joke here. So it's kind of one of those deals. We weren't ready. We were not ready to see him play like that. I'm just going to state it. You know what I mean? Like, so these are the things that you can't have happen no matter how good your defense is. You can't have that type of play compounded and added on to what the offense is. And I give the defense credit, guys. They played for 90% of the first half. They were just playing unbelievable. And then all of a sudden, the offensive turnovers. I want to ask you guys this. Did it feel like, and can you see this happening Saturday as we move forward, a situation again where the offense or the defense is playing extraordinarily well, forcing turnovers, doing things, and then eventually the morale of the defense just kind of just slumps over and they're just like, damn, man, like, how much more can we do to help this team win? And it's not happening on the other side of the field to help us help the team win.
Yeah, well, to be honest, Brandon, I think it's less about morale and more just about the fatigue factor. I mean, you're on the field. You're only human, right? You're on the field enough. You're going to start to wear out. Your technique's going to suffer. Your pursuit's going to suffer. All of the things that make this Oklahoma defense what it is, to a certain extent, are compromised when they have to be on the field all the freaking time. And so if this offense is not sustaining drives on the other side and giving the defense a chance to get a breather, then you can only expect them to stem the tide for so long before the opposing offense is going to start scoring. Like, we all knew at a certain point, Texas is going to break through, right? Texas is going to put a touchdown on the board and you're going to have to answer. And shoot, Oklahoma had no answer offensively. But even so, like, if you want to be able to put yourself in position to beat South Carolina this weekend, you have to play complementary football, which is the most basic fundamental prerequisite for any winning football team. It cannot all be happening on one side of the ball. If you are one dimensional as a football team and you have one unit that's really good and one unit that's not pulling their weight, you're never going to get very far. You might rack up a whole bunch of empty wins like we saw the Lincoln Riley teams do, but when you get seriously challenged, you're going to falter. And we saw that time and again over the years. And unfortunately, Oklahoma is now in a situation where they're in the SEC, fellas. South Carolina is the last unranked team that this Oklahoma program is going to face in SEC play the rest of the year. So you no longer have to wait till end of November, beginning of December to get seriously challenged. You're getting seriously challenged every single week. And so there is a lot on the shoulders of Michael Hawkins and this offense to just be able to figure something out, to be able to ensure that that defense can get a breath, can rest on the sidelines, can review the film, just get a sense of what they need to do next time they go out there, as opposed to having to hustle back out after 5 offensive plays, because your offense just can't sustain a drive.
Yeah, I get that. It was the first half and they were coming off a bye. You know what I mean? Like, I get fatigue, and especially mental fatigue gets to you that, man, no matter how well I play, we're not going to have a chance to win if the other side doesn't pull their weight. But man, that second quarter, like, even at times when the offense was playing well in the first quarter, like, Quinn had dudes open. Like, the defense had them shook enough to where Quinn's playing poorly against OU. Stop me if you've heard that before. But Quinn's playing poorly, and just the swings of the game. Like, I'm not a believer of, if we make that first field goal, we win 34-6 instead of 34-3. Like, I don't think that's how football works, right? It's, if you go down there and make Quinn actually pay for that interception and make a field goal, which I think Zach Schmidt actually makes, but that's an argument for another day. It's like, you at least make them pay for their turnover. And then you get it in their head like, oh, I can't do that again. You might get them to bring it in a little bit. You might get them to press. But once Texas realizes, oh man, we can give the ball away and they can't even score. Like, okay, that's interesting. So I think that goes a little bit differently. Just look at the Hawkins fumble. It's 14-3 at that point. Hawkins it's a 1st and 10, and he gets out to the 43. If he just retains the ball, it's 2nd and 2 on the midfield logo with like a minute 51 left. You can run that clock down, maybe get a field goal out of that. You're going to halftime at like a 14-6. And I know this is all hypotheticals, but that's not I'm not saying that he throws a bomb on the next play. Like, I'm not getting out of control here. Sure. But stands to reason that you could have picked up 20 more yards over the next 2 minutes if you had a 2nd and 2 right there. So, and you had some confidence, right? The problem is you swing that. Now it's 21-3, and Michael Hawkins has now fumbled the ball. Taylor Tatum fumbled the ball. So you've got 2 true freshmen against the number 1 team in the country running a brand new offense, and they have no confidence. So that, like, it was a 0-win game. Once they went into halftime and they just got their doors blown off in the second quarter, the defense wasn't tackling well. I don't know how, like, you compare it to last year's halftime or 2021's halftime or something like that. You could see how there was real belief in that locker room. We're going to win this game. Even, in 2021, there was a little bit of a spark before halftime, despite going down 28-7. This biggest sunshine pumper of them all, probably me. Even if I were in that locker room, I'd be like, guys, we're probably cooked. And it is what it is. I just don't think there's a situation you can come back from it after that. But it was the run defense that really, in my mind, let the team down. Now, going forward, that needs to be shored up, right? And I don't want this to turn into a post-game pod when it's a pre-game pod. So the run defense specifically against Lenore Sellers and Rocket Sanders, like, those guys can run the ball. Lenore Sellers, freshman, 4 touchdowns, 4 picks on the season. He's thrown a pick in 4 straight games. So you like to think Oklahoma creates a lot of turnovers. Maybe they can turn him over, but he's a load. He's like 6'3", 240. So he is going to be a load to bring down. So you got to get a full head of steam if you're R. Mason Thomas. But with that, Rocket Sanders, some of you remember him from his Arkansas days when he was a sophomore. I think he was top. I think he was number 2 in the country in rushing or number 2 in the SEC in rushing behind Quinshon Judkins, who's now at Ohio State, obviously. But like he ran for like 1,400 yards and 10 touchdowns that year, and like he looks to be getting back into form. Early in the year, he lit up LSU, went for like 140 something on 19 carries with 2 touchdowns. Like Rocket Sanders is an absolute problem. Lenore Sellers on the ground is a load. So if the run defense for Oklahoma doesn't show up and show out, it could get ugly.
Yeah. I mean, the one thing I think you can kind of count on, or you feel like you can count on, is Lenore Sellers playing a little dicey, if you will. I mean, he's what I believe maybe 61, 62% completion. And he's only at, I mean, he's not his average and, throwing stats don't look that much better than what Oklahoma has amassed. I believe I don't even think it's like seven yards a completion, maybe. I was looking at it the other day, and I know he has 4 turnovers in the last 4 games, and I believe only like 4 touchdown passes. So, and I think the crazy stat, and y'all probably have to look this up while I'm talking here. I believe it was like 21 sacks, something to that extent. So they give up sacks is my point. He is not he's not a quick decision maker. I think that is going to help Oklahoma quite a bit as far as just defensively. Now, granted, if Rocket Sanders starts to get going and Lenore Sellers starts to use his feet really well, which he does quite a bit, he runs a lot. That's where things can get a little dicey because we've all seen Brent Venables' defenses versus a running quarterback over the years. It hasn't been. I kind of feel like that's been the Achilles heel more than anything else, right? Over the years, is a mobile quarterback with Brent Venables' defense. So I think that's where things could get a little dicey, is if Lenore Sellers starts to, the pocket gets crazy and he takes off and there's nobody there, because Venables is trying to bring pressure and be exotic and all that type of stuff to really cause turnovers, and it bites him in the butt as far as the QB run game. So, or the scramble game. I think those are the things you got to look for if you're Oklahoma defensively in this game in particular. It's just, like I said before we started the podcast, at least they don't have Xavier Legette. I mean, I think that is the big positive of this whole deal, is you don't have to face a Xavier Legette offense. Because
Right.
if you compound that with Rocket Sanders and Lenore Sellers' legs, you got problems at that point, like major problems. And yeah, I don't know how exotic Brent Venables could be at that point, because you don't want to put Des Malone on an island. You don't want to put, I think the only one you would want to put on an island, and I don't even think I would want to do that against Xavier Legette, is probably Eli Bowen. And that sounds really weird, right?
Player in the Texas game.
Yeah, the freshman. So outside of that, I don't know. I mean, if Gentry Williams was back, okay, yeah, I wouldn't. I think he could hold his own, but unfortunately, you're down one of your 2 best corners on the team, and the other one is a true freshman. At least how they're playing right now.
Shoot, man. If I took nothing else positive away from that game last Saturday, Eli Bowen, in no capacity does Eli Bowen look like a true freshman.
No.
He's playing like a seasoned, savvy veteran out there. And you saw that not only in his picture perfect tackling, his pursuit, good angles, all that stuff. But man, and we talked about it in the postgame podcast, the play he makes in coverage in the end zone on Ryan Wingo, who's 6 inches taller than him.
Yeah.
Man, like Eli Bowen's somebody you can count on at cornerback. And he's probably the only guy you can count on at quarterback right now. What's going to be crucial for Oklahoma against South Carolina is that they make Lenoris Sellers beat them through the air.
Mm-hmm.
What cannot happen is, because for instance, and we all said this last week about OU Texas, is Oklahoma's recipe for victory, if there is one, is taking away the running game from the Longhorns. Lo and behold, they did not do that. And when you don't take away the run game, that enables Steve Sarkisian to start cooking, because when he can run the ball effectively and throw the ball effectively with the schemes that he's capable of drawing up, it's going to be a long day. It's going to be a long day if you can't take something away from a guy like that. For South Carolina, the offense isn't as explosive. It's more methodical. They can generate big plays. We've seen it, but I think the big play capability for South Carolina more so lies in the ground game with Lenoris Sellers and Raheem Sanders. So that front seven is really going to be challenged. And if you can make it difficult on South Carolina to run the football and force Lenoris Sellers to drop back 30 times, well, then I think that's a recipe for success, because Lenoris Sellers has thrown an interception in 4 consecutive games now. He, much like Quinn Ewers, is going to give you an opportunity to turn him over at some point. You just have to capitalize. We've seen Oklahoma capitalize in the past. They're opportunistic as a unit, but where you run into trouble is if South Carolina can establish the run game in the early stages, then that's going to enable them to better set up their aerial attack. And if you allow South Carolina to cultivate some offensive balance through 60 minutes, that's probably something, guys, that you're just not capable of being able to match blows with, because your offense right now is the epitome of one-dimensional. The only running back that can get anything going on the ground game is Taylor Tatum, who quite frankly cannot be trusted to play 3 downs right now because he is a liability in pass protection. And that just kind of is a microcosm of all of Oklahoma's struggles right now. The one guy that offers you some promise is the one guy that you can't use exhaustively in that backfield, because he is so deficient right now and so inexperienced in pretty much every area other than handling the football, carrying the football.
Well, and is the answer, obviously, we've kind of buried the lead here. A half hour into the pod. We thought Ant Hill and Colin Simmons had a day. South Carolina's got some edge players, bro.
Oh, man.
Kyle Kennard is leading the SEC in sacks. He's got 7.5 on the year. He's a Georgia Tech transfer. He was a 4-year guy there, 5th-year senior now. He had I think freshman year he had 2, sophomore he had 2, junior he had 2. Senior year he popped and had 6 sacks. We're halfway through the season. He's already got 7.5. So the dude's playing out of his mind. I don't think South Carolina had any idea what they got in him. I know they didn't think they had a first-round pick on their hands, but one publication I read yesterday had him going 17th overall. So you've got him, and then you've got the ultra-talented Dylan Stewart, who was a composite 5-star. He was famous or infamous for emptying the imaginary clip on Jackson Dart in the Ole Miss game after a sack. Big penalty. It was a big problem. Now it's a national story. But that dude, he's incredible. So you got Dylan Stewart on one side, and you've got Kyle Kennard on the other.
Yep.
What I had issue with last week a little bit, like, I'm cool with moving the pocket for Michael Hawkins because he can get outside, he can make the throws, he can run, whatever. The teams you don't want to move the pocket against are teams with ultra talented edges. You don't want to make them run shorter distances, or you don't want to run towards them. So in this game, I hope to see a little bit of learning from the Texas game in multiple aspects, but understanding that, hey, we can't get outside, go side to side nearly as much against these ultra talented edges. If you need to, go up the middle, stay in the tackle box, step up, everything like that, because I think that's going to give you your best opportunity for success, because they're not as good on the back end or even just at the linebacker level as Texas was. So if you maybe throw 2 backs in there, you talked about Taylor Tatum, maybe do all 2 backs, right? And keep 1 back to block. Maybe you leak 1 out onto a route, anything like that.
Taylor Tatum's not blocking.
Brandon's boy was wide open on a wheel, and you can do things like that. You're going to need help blocking those 2. You cannot just leave your tackles on islands and say, good luck. You got to throw tight ends. You got to do what you do against those guys. But I would love to see a lot of two-back sets against South Carolina, because if you can mitigate those guys, you give yourself a chance. If you let those guys run wild, or God forbid, run close to them or towards them, like, you're cooked. So that's what I'm hoping to see from the offense. Identify what the defense does extremely well and just try and work against that, or at least not help them in that game plan.
Well, and to me, you have got to, like, I think you have to ride or die with Taylor Tatum on Saturday. And here's why I say that.
Ooh, okay.
No. But
I'm interested just because of the blocking issue, like that right there. I think that keeps DeMarco Murray from maybe playing him a lot, is because
oh yeah, no, and I
situation.
certainly understand that perspective. Here's my perspective though. You remember what R. Mason Thomas said after the Tulane game, when everything seemed to be coming so easy for him down the stretch, or maybe it was after the Auburn game. He said the reason things became so easy for me in that fourth quarter, and why I was able to put as much heat on the quarterback as I was able to, is because we knew they were throwing.
Yeah.
And so for Oklahoma, if Dylan Stewart and Kyle Kennard can line up on every snap and know that you're throwing the ball, you make their lives 10 times easier.
Oh,
Two of the most gifted edge rushers in the country. They're lining up opposite one another. And if they know on any given snap, okay, it's a drop back, how much easier does that make their lives? And so to me, yes, I concede that it is a massive point of concern to have Taylor Tatum in the backfield at this point if you are expecting him to be able to contribute as a blocker. But this goes back to the tweet I sent out yesterday. Taylor Tatum is averaging twice as many yards per carry as any other member of the Oklahoma backfield right now, with at least 5 carries on the season. So you have got to establish some sort of threat on the ground. You have got to keep South Carolina honest. And the only guy I think that is capable of keeping them honest, because he's the only guy that actually provides some burst in the run game right this second, is Taylor Tatum. He's the guy, okay, you see 8 out there, you're going to have to account for that based on the tape you have watched on this Oklahoma offense. You know that 8 is the guy that has the most juice out of the backfield. And so having Taylor Tatum in the game is going to keep South Carolina honest. And if you don't keep them honest and they don't have to fear the run, then Dylan Stewart and Kyle Kennard are going to have a field day. And they might have a field day regardless, right? Like, to a certain extent, those guys are just going to get theirs. They're going to impact the game in some form or fashion. You're not going to completely render them silent for 60 minutes of football. But the more you can keep that front honest and not enable them to rely on Michael Hawkins dropping back to pass, and the more you can limit the amount of things that Dylan Stewart and Kyle Kennard have to process as they prepare to come off the edge, that, I believe, sets you up for some amount of offensive success, more than the alternative. Because to me, having a guy back there that is not a great blocker, but that is very talented with the ball in his hands, very dangerous with the ball in his hands, to me, that is superior than having no rushing attack at all, and maybe having a running back that's a little bit more capable of blocking, but Lord knows your quarterback is going to be feeling the heat every single time he drops back.
Okay, so I'm with you on all the things that you just, all the stats and everything you threw out there. I just, for some odd reason, I can't wrap my head around that we're sitting here saying that that's the only running back Oklahoma has that can run the ball. And I know that this year it hasn't been pretty, no matter who they've had back there outside of Taylor Tatum. But all I can think of is there's a running back last year with 5 games had almost 800 yards in 5 games. Like, that's just crazy to me. Like, we just sit there and go, well, he can't run the ball anymore. And I'm talking about, so he just can't run the ball anymore. I find that hard to believe. This is 2 years in a row of Javonte Barnes being like this, right? We haven't seen that out of Sawchuk. The only time we've seen Sawchuk was the Cheez-It Bowl, where he was badass, and all last year.
Yeah.
Or half of last year, because the first half he couldn't run because he had one leg. But and he barely played. But then when they actually threw him in there, he went off for almost 800 yards. So to me, I think those are, again, I'll say it like I did the Texas. You have to play, if you're going to play two back, you have to have Sawchuk in there and Taylor Tatum. You've got to be able to have some sort of threat more than 5 yards a run. And I'm not blasting Javonte Barnes because he's going to get you what he's going to get you. If there's 5 yards to be had, he's going to get you 5. If there's 10 yards, he's going to get you 10. But what he's not going to do is he's not going to break that 60, 70-yard run. Those two guys can. We've seen them do it. We've seen them do it with our own two eyes.
I agree to an extent, but it's also he was doing it behind an offensive line late in the year that was Rouse, Caden Green, and Andrew Rame on that side.
He did it against one of the best defense in the Alamo Bowl in a makeshift offensive line too, with a bunch of nobodies too.
I get it, but he's also averaging 2.1 yards a carry this year.
I get it.
Line. Like at a certain point,
I get it. I'm with you.
I can't explain why he's not.
I can't either.
Big runs or anything like that. At a certain point, we can't just say, man, we got to figure out why. We got to figure out why. We just have to understand that halfway through the season, it has not happened. So you have to give it.
Which was exactly what we were saying last year. Halfway through the season, it has not happened, and then all of a sudden.
But that's completely unfair because the first half of the season he was hurt.
Right, but they couldn't find a run game period, no matter who they had back then.
But we said it last year because, as you just said, he was running on one leg for the first half of the year. He's been healthy all year, as far as we know. They wouldn't put him back on kickoff if he wasn't. So he's been healthy the whole year. So where last year we could say, hey, we need something to pop, and then he got healthy and popped. He's been healthy the whole year. The problem is those Big 12 defenses that he was getting fat on.
That's fair. That's fair.
That's not South Carolina's defensive line. It's not going to be LSU's defensive line. It's not going to be Alabama's defensive line. It's not going to be Ole Miss's defensive line. It's not even going to be Missouri's defensive line. There's Gavin Sawchuk needs to be in space. He's a home run hitter. The space just when people talk about going from college to the NFL and the holes close that much quicker, that's how holes close against these type of defenses. So that's the problem is he's been healthy all year and we haven't seen it. We didn't see it against Temple, Tulane, Houston, any of these. I just think if I'm pulling a two-back set, I'm bringing Barnes and Tatum in personally. I would love to see Sawchuk. I still think the game looks just a slight bit different. I don't think we win, but I think the game looks a slight bit different if Hawkins sees Sawchuk on that wheel, hits him. Who knows? Sawchuk might score that game. Might score that. Who knows?
Or the handoff on the read, and the hole was about semi. Do you remember that play early in the game? Yeah, I mean,
but I don't think that Sawchuk is just so unlucky that his 10 plays this year that he would have scored touchdowns on, he got the ball 0 times. And then all the plays he wouldn't have scored touchdown on, those are the 20 times he got the ball. I don't think that 6 games into the season that's how the cookie has crumbled. But I think I agree wholeheartedly. You have to have a run threat. How we make that work, it remains to be seen, obviously. But I think you do two-back sets. But also, if you want to just slow down a little bit those edge rushers, you got to get a screen game going. You've got to get some quick throws. You've got to get something like that going. And Hawkins has a quick trigger. He's just got to pull it, right? So he's got to get the ball up quick. What I like is Hawkins' ability to lob the ball up over those rushing defensive ends and drop it to a running back in the flat like that. We've seen that work for a touchdown that got called back, and then I think a 2-point conversion, and I think another touchdown. He's super comfortable with that throw. I would like to see that. Something to get Stewart and Kennard to at least think twice, right? Be a half step slower. You're not going to get them to, just completely be boggled. But if you can get them a half step slower, that's the difference between getting sacked and who knows, maybe scoring.
Now, I'm with you on everything you said. I mean, I get Taylor Tatum's had 20 carries as well, and a lot of that came in mop-up duty, obviously, at the end of the ball games to start the season. But I don't know. I just 70. We've given Barnes 71 carries this year, right? 3 yards a carry. Like that's just, I'm sorry. Like you're something else. Somebody else has got to be the one carrying the ball at this point. 3 yards a carry is not going to get you. You're not going to win ball games with a running back with 3 yards a carry. And that's my point. It's got to be one of those two is what I'm saying. It's got to be Taylor Tatum and or Gavin Sawchuk has got to do it because Barnes has got 71 carries. He's got 3.5 times more than those guys do as far as carries go this season. And doesn't have a whole hell of a lot to show for it, right? Like it's just not. And are these running backs better than what they are being shown? I think that's. Can we all agree that's probably the truth? Is the line just isn't. It's just because it's been such a mismatch, and it's not fair to even point it on the offensive line exclusively because injuries and everything has made it just be musical chairs this year.
Like everything with the offense,
yes,
you can't point to one thing. Like
yeah.
I know everybody is just going to spam the comments with, fire Latrell, fire Latrell, fire Latrell, whatever. Like I get that. But like it's everything. It's your top 5 wide receivers being out. I think Deion Burks still leads the
They're
team.
Also loading the box against Oklahoma like
forever.
crazy.
Farouk has the second longest catch of the year. It was his, I think, only catch of the year. Like it happened in week 1. So like you
4 plays into the game.
You have some of these where it's like, dude, you don't have threats to even make the defense think about it. And yes, I like what Zion Kearney did. I like what I've seen from Brennan Thompson at times. I've liked what I've seen from JJ Hester at times. But it is not the same as say you had Nick Anderson, Jaden Gibson, and Deion Burks out there as your top. Like it's just simply not the same. So you point to that. You point to a makeshift offensive line that I believe, if my count is correct, have had 10 different combinations play this season. 10 different combinations. Like that's not sustainable. You look at an offensive line like Texas, I think they've had the same offensive line for at least 2 years now. So like across all 5. So like that, you need continuity. You can't just say, oh, well, now you got people saying, oh, they're not any good. Play the freshmen. Okay, what is plugging EPL going to do? Get our 11th combination in there? Like the only change that I would want to make is maybe I thought Troy Everett played really well. I would like to see him get some snaps at center. I think he's got some value there. He's a very loud communicator. He's played a lot of football. He's played a decent amount of football at OU compared to everybody on that offensive line. And that's the thing. It's between all of that, the quarterback change, the 2 different kinds of schemes of offenses that we've seen from the RPO to, what they tried to install for Texas. Like all of those things have made the offense bad.
Yeah.
Like it's not just this should be a 50-point a game offense, but the guy doesn't know how to call it. Like, or this should be a 50-point, offense, but, the running backs aren't getting it done. Or this should be a 50-point offense, but the wide receivers aren't stepping up. Like there's 5 different things that have gone wrong for this Oklahoma offense right now. And it's just, they all happen at the same time and it sucks.
Yep. And so I was talking to somebody yesterday. Oh, by the way, you said 10 combinations. It's actually 11. I'm just kidding.
Okay, it must have been like
you miscounted. It was 1 extra. Dang.
Did Troy come in was Ozida in there with Troy? Because that would have been the 11th.
Yes.
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 Okay,
Ozida and Troy were in there at the same time.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
That was the one that I missed.
Yeah, and I was being facetious because it doesn't matter whether it's 10 or 11. It's
that's still so many. Like that's so many.
It's ridiculous. So I was talking to, and this is going to actually add to the combination if this actually takes place. I was talking to somebody yesterday, and they told me that Isaiah Autry has been giving R. Mason Thomas fits in practice and looking very, very, very good. My question is if you're not happy with Tarquin at tackle, why not? Like at this point, why not give?
Why not? Is because eventually you have to land on a group that you stick with.
I understand that, but
like
I'm talking about in a rotation. I'm talking about rotation. I'm not talking about starters. I'm talking about when you sub in. Why not if he's doing that well in practice? Like I've had multiple people tell me this, but somebody yesterday was just like straight up definitive, like he is coming on, like he's being a menace in practice right now. And obviously it's scout, whatever, but you got to find something in rotation. And I'm talking like sub, right? You got to, your main pieces need to stay the same. They need to stay the same. You need some sort of continuity. I'm with you on that 100%. They do not need any more new starters right now. They need to figure that group has to figure it out at some point. But if you have this talent, right? I think at least giving them a shot in a rotationary aspect is not the worst idea. Like, and I'm not saying like bring him in there and let him play for 5 series or whatever. Okay, let him see a series or two and see what he does. And if it doesn't work, okay, you go back to what wasn't working anyways and run with that some more.
My problem is one of the reasons the offensive line isn't working is because they've got no series together. My thing is, if you put them in, the margin for error is so thin, some would say non-existent on offense, that you can't afford to rotate a guy in for a series just to see if it gets better, because you're taking away the gelling that could happen and the continuity that could happen if you left the other guy in.
I get
Now, I mean, I just don't think you're going to, at this point in the season, it would be like going back to Jackson right now, in my opinion. Like, eventually you got to just roll with a guy and go. Like, you can't continue to waffle. Hey, well, this guy, Logan Howland was the scout team all-star last season. And this year, like, I mean, he would have gotten killed if he put him last year, and he was killing it on the scout team. This year, he's seen a little bit of time, but he had to move over. He was a tight end, whatnot. Like, there are reasons. But it's like, if you look on scout team, sure. But cool, you're going to be hopefully awesome next year. See if you can win the job in spring and see if you can be the starter for the whole time, or in fall camp, be the starter the whole time, because everybody's always given Bill hell for not being able to figure out the offensive line until 4 or 5 weeks into the season. If we sit back and say, hey, I think really 12 or 13 combinations on the offensive line is really when we find our sweet spot. Like, what are we doing here? Like, we're going to be 10
Lucky
games.
number 13.
Like that's it. That's insane to me. Absolutely insane. Like, so, like, no, I want to stick with the only change I would make probably is I would like to see Troy take over at center. I thought he played well at center, and then just stick with it the rest of the season. Barring injury, maybe trade somebody out, but I don't want reps being taken away because somebody is playing well in scout team, and then they get out there against Dylan Stewart, and Dylan's like, oh, who is this kid? Oh, okay. And then, Hawkins, is in danger all of a sudden because it was like, all right, let's put him in for a series, see what happens.
Hey, not to make it any worse on anybody that's worried about the defensive ends. And I know he doesn't have amazing stats this year, but I believe Desmond Amozulu is also plays for South Carolina, and that's not great. I mean, that sucks. It sucks for the opposing team when that's your backup.
Right,
to be that talented. He's stupid talented. Parker, you remember him?
I do.
He was so good in high school.
Yeah. They're absolutely loaded.
South Carolina always has good defensive ends. I think it's like a thing there.
Yeah, so their defensive ends coach, a fellow by the name of Sterling Lucas, he's a bad dude.
Yeah.
Bad dude.
Yeah. Totally.
Keep in mind, he was the one that recruited Nick Harbor, too. Nick Harbor was recruited to South Carolina.
For defensive end, he's a wide receiver.
Oh, yes, now he's playing wide receiver. Yeah, Sterling Lucas is a bad man.
And we want to put in Isaiah Autry to deal with these guys? I mean, come on now.
Remember the day when Harbor was like in love with Oklahoma?
Oh yeah, that was a time.
Jani-King.
The Jani-King days, yeah.
Yeah.
You gotta tell me.
All right. Let's talk about that 2 QB system, and then let's do our pitch.
It's not worth talking about.
It isn't worth talking about, but it was brought up. I guess it is worth talking about.
It was a politically correct answer and something that will never actually happen.
Oh, I don't think it happened, because if it happens, I think I just think
you waffle, you stand to lose both. Sticking with Hawkins, QB1 going forward. Ain't no 2 quarterbacking.
Yeah,
I think Hawkins just has to get back to everything that he used to be. He has not been. What got him to this point, he has not been. What he was against Tennessee, he has not been. in the last few games. He has got to get back to that gunslinger mentality of F it, just F it. Just I'm going to make plays, and that's what I'm going to do. If I have to throw it in a tight window, if it gets picked, it gets picked. But you want to know what? The only way you can make a big play is to try to make a big play and not play to not make plays or to not make a mistake, I guess.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where it's been. And if he plays that way, I think Oklahoma has a chance. If he plays that way, Oklahoma can win the ball game, and they
Well, they
will
certainly
win the ball
can.
game.
Yeah, they certainly can. I like what Brent Venables has said about giving Michael Hawkins the opportunity to establish a body of work. Because I said it at the time. I said it as early as the Houston game. I still think it's 100% true. You make that switch from Jackson Arnold to Michael Hawkins, there's no going back. Like that's what you're riding with the rest of the way. You got to stick it out. You got to just ride with the kid regardless of what happens. And to be fair, he hasn't made any poor decisions. There are throws certainly that have been there that maybe he hasn't pulled the trigger on. Hasn't been necessarily as aggressive or like happy feet, whatever you want to say, to critique his game. That's all fine and well, but he has not made mistakes with the football. He has not committed turnovers. He's played, uh, well, to be honest, he's played conservative. And again, to your point, Brandon, I don't know that that's who Michael Hawkins is or what he is naturally. I ruminated on it in the post game podcast. It's worth rehashing. I don't know how much of this is coaching and how much of it is a true freshman. Also, like seeing how his predecessor fell out of favor and not wanting to replicate that. So I don't know at the end of the day, but I think in as much as it is possible to get Hawkins in a rhythm, the one thing you got to do in order to get him in a rhythm is have some continuity. And that starts up front with the offensive line. And to your point, Travis, I think you ought to just pick a 5 and roll with it. Eliminate as many unnecessary changes and or revolving doors as possible in this offense. Try to get a rhythm going and let your freshman quarterback just be who he is. And that is a creative playmaker who's dynamic with his legs and can push the ball down the field if receivers get open and get a step on their man.
So on the Hawkins deal, just real quick, I was talking to somebody 2 or 3 days ago, and this is a QB person, like straight up, and they were talking about Arnold and Hawkins and everything, and I thought it was an interesting phrase, and I want to hear y'all's thoughts on this. And they said the offense is having similar results, just going about it differently with quarterbacks right now. And one was turning the ball over, the other one just isn't making plays that they should be making. And at the end result is the exact same of no offensive output. What do y'all think about that? Like, I thought that was an interesting phrase because both of them are better than that. And we all know Hawkins can make plays. He just hasn't done it. Does that make sense? Do you agree with that? It's similar. They've gone, one was turning the ball over like crazy. The other one is just not making plays that need to be made in the name of not turning the ball over. It's kind of what they said.
Well, to be honest, I think he's playing the way you might expect a true freshman to play given the circumstances. If he's eager to get outside the pocket, well, it makes sense. His offensive line isn't very good. If he's unwilling to take shots, well, it makes sense. There's not as much trust to be had in third string wide receivers to go make contested catches than there would be in guys like Jaden Gibson and Andrell Anthony and Nick Anderson. So, again, circumstantially speaking, there's only so much you can expect of Hawkins, but what you can certainly expect from this offense, if you can establish any continuity as far as the personnel is concerned, and especially up front in the trenches, you can expect this offense to gradually get better throughout the course of the season. And if that doesn't happen, well, then there are some uncomfortable conversations that need to be had this offseason. And frankly, there are already some uncomfortable conversations that probably need to be had this offseason.
Yeah, and with that, I think so many people in the quarterback conversation are forgetting the 6 quarters of non-Texas quarterback play that we saw from Michael Hawkins Jr. and just judging him as the true freshman against the number one team in the country after a 50 play install of new offense, and then they don't call some of that offense. And it's just like, it's crazy because somebody was like, he threw the ball away on fourth down. It's like, yeah, the game was out of hand. Like that didn't change the outcome of the game. Everybody's forgetting the first 3.5 games of the season that we saw from Jackson. So it's like Jackson had every opportunity in the world to establish himself as the bona fide starter. Go out there and absolutely light up Temple. Go out there, I mean, throw for 200 yards once, for God's sakes. Go out there and hold on to the ball in a winnable game against Tennessee. Don't throw it backwards. Don't fumble it immediately after. Don't throw directly to it. Like, go win the job. The job was given to you already. Go win it. Like, go secure it. And he didn't do that. And I think everybody is so emotionally attached to the Texas game that they see that and they're like, well, time to go to the portal for a quarterback because this guy stinks. Like, maybe Ant Hill and Colin Simmons and Vernon Broughton and these guys and Andrew Makuba and these guys maybe they just played well. Maybe Jade Barron and all these guys, maybe the number one team in the country is just good. And they made a makeshift offensive line and third string wide receivers and a true freshman quarterback look like a number one team in the country should make them look. And I think we will see a bit different Michael Hawkins going forward because the situation will be different. Continuity some places, a bit more chemistry with the wide receivers as he continues to practice with them. And there's no turning back. So let's get to the picks.
Yeah, I was about to say. All right. I'm just gonna do the two big games in OU, South Carolina. So obviously Georgia, Texas, and Tennessee, Alabama. Was it Tennessee, Alabama? Which else pick?
I like Alabama to win that game.
Yeah, it's kind of funny because Tennessee has been the offensive, right? Josh Heupel, high flying, Hendon Hooker, all those receivers, like, and then Alabama has been the Crimson Tide defense, right? Nobody, the strong. It's kind of flipped a little bit. Tennessee's kind of struggling to score. Their defense is still pretty good. I mean, KDB, if you listen to Joel Klatt, turned Alabama into 2017 Oklahoma, where they can score. They're going to be in shootouts, but they can't stop anybody. So I still think Alabama wins the game. I think the script is out on Tennessee. I think you slow them down. I don't think their tackles are very good. I think Alabama finds a way to get it done.
I agree. I'm taking Alabama. I think Oklahoma and Brent Venables showed laid the blueprint on how to slow down Tennessee and get into Nico's head, and everybody else has kind of followed suit, and they haven't figured out a way to combat that yet offensively. Maybe they do this weekend. Maybe they don't. Maybe they're smoking cigars in the locker room. Maybe they're not, but I think they're not going to be, and it'll be on the Alabama side smoking the cigar after this game with Alabama winning. Georgia, Texas.
Ooh.
Yeah, it's just a fun, good. Oh, I'm so excited for this. I'll just go ahead and say it. I'm picking Texas.
Okay. I'm taking Georgia. I still think there are aspects of this Texas football team that are slightly suspect to me. Like if they win this game, you have no choice but to validate them as very obviously the top team in the nation.
Mm-hmm.
I truly don't think they're there yet. Like they're certainly one of the upper echelon teams in college football. I don't know that they are far and away the best team in college football right now. And I think Georgia is a very complete football team, not a perfect football team, but a complete one, certainly well coached. And they've been in these types of moments and these types of games a lot more frequently than Texas has in recent years. So I like the Bulldogs to get it done. And that should help provide some structure for what ought to be a very interesting race at the top of the SEC the rest of the way between Georgia and Texas and Alabama and Texas A&M. And who knows, maybe another team here and there that could vie for a spot.
LSU doesn't have a conference loss.
Yeah, there you go. LSU as well.
Yeah, I think Georgia wins the football game simply because, and it sounds crazy for a guy that has back-to-back national titles, but I think Kirby needs it. I think when you're winning like they were winning with their big streak or their regular season streak, as ESPN was trying to push down our throats, like all of the arrests and the shoving the opposing quarterback and all that, like you had people saying, "Man, Georgia's winning so much, we just need more criminals on this team." Like there are people saying, "Man, that must be the secret to their success. They just win, 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 win." Like Kirby's not getting fired. And obviously, let's just get obvious things out of the way. But I do think there are some people that start holding him a little bit more accountable if he gets his second loss of the season before the calendar turns to November. Because you can lose to Alabama if Alabama looks like they have not taken a step back from Saban. Alabama going and losing to Vanderbilt and then almost losing to South Carolina, like that looks bad for Georgia because the Georgia loss, you can't write that off as, oh, well, we lost the number one team in the country. What do you expect? So, like, I think that Kirby understands this is one of the biggest regular season games of his career, in my opinion. And I think they prepare like it. And I don't think they get their second SEC loss before the calendar turns to November.
Yeah, well, I'm the only one picking Texas. Cool. All right. Oklahoma, South Carolina. I'm just going to get it out of the way. 27-20. South Carolina is my pick. I think the defense forces Lenore Sellers to make a few mistakes, but ultimately that isn't enough. I'm at the point where I'll believe it with the offense when I see it.
Yeah.
And I just haven't seen it, and I don't believe it. I know that they scored enough to win against Auburn, and maybe they do. Maybe they get 28, maybe they get 30 this week. I just have to see it. I have got to see it. I just can't get the Texas game out of my head, and I can't get the first half of the Auburn game out of my head. And that's where I stand right now. I think the defense does well. I think they do what they need to do. I just don't think it's enough. And I think eventually they just wear down a little bit, and South Carolina makes more plays than Oklahoma does.
Yeah, and I'm right there with you, Brandon. I think last week pounded out whatever remained of the optimist in me surrounding this football team. And I would love to be wrong for the sake of the majority of our viewers and fans and subscribers, but I can't in good conscience take Oklahoma to win this game, especially when there seems to be as much of a mismatch in the trenches as there is between South Carolina's defensive line and Oklahoma's offensive line. And so, look, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. But fool me three times, right? I took Oklahoma over Tennessee. I legitimately thought, as did many, that they were going to come out with so many wrinkles of the game plan, both offensively and defensively, and slay the giant and topple the monster and beat Texas last week. At this point, like, I just saw nothing last week. I saw absolutely nothing last week with an extra week of preparation, mind you, that would lead me to believe that they're going to rebound against what is a talented South Carolina team that has played some good football games, even the ones that they have lost. You look at that loss to LSU, they played very well. You look at that loss to Alabama, they played very well. As much as I want to believe that Oklahoma can get this thing back on track this week, Brandon, my heart is not there right now. I have South Carolina winning this game 24-13.
Well, if you needed some sunshine, you know where to come.
Here we go, baby.
Here's the thing. I think it's funny. Like, reliant on my pick, we all three picked Oklahoma to outright win a game where they were 14.5 dogs at the time. We all picked Oklahoma to win. Oklahoma is currently a home favorite against South Carolina, and you guys are saying we're not even going to keep it within a touchdown. I think that
I said touchdown. 27-20. Come on.
Oh, 27-20, my bad. I think the Texas game just emotionally damaged so many people. And I think the Oklahoma run defense fixes that flat tire that they had in the second quarter against Texas. I do think Texas is a really good football team, and they show that against us. I do think the extra week of preparation might have been a bit of a snake bite, Parker, because you know, as I know, that they tried to install dozens of plays in the 2 week span. You know, retroactively, hindsight's 2020. Do you say, well, if they just would have run the offense they ran against Auburn with 2 weeks of preparation, how would have it looked? Or maybe if they just installed 20 new plays instead of 50, how does it look? Like hindsight's 2020, totally get it. But the extra week of preparation might have given them a false sense of security of we've got all this time to teach them all these new things, and it just flat out it was poorly done. So, but I do think you're a home favorite. I think it does look a lot like the Auburn game. I think Michael Hawkins makes just enough plays. He's not going to go out there and put up 50 by any stretch of the imagination. But I think the scoring looks very similar to Auburn. But I think it ends up being 24-27 Oklahoma. I think Oklahoma gets a defensive score, 2 offensive scores, and then kicks 2 field goals. I think that's where I'm at with it. I think they win as home favorites by a slight margin, and I think the outcome shows that Texas was just really, really good. And that's just something that we've got to maybe get used to or accept for this week, because it's been years since we've actually believed it, right? Like even the 49-0 game, we were like, we didn't have a quarterback. Like we had Braden Willis playing that game. So now I think we've been, over the last decade at least, been conditioned to not give Texas the credit for being the team if they even do win, right? I think this time Texas actually was that good against us. They had answers for everything, outclassed us at every turn, and I just don't think South Carolina is going to make us look nearly as bad, even despite their impeccable edge play.
Yep. All right. Well, there you go. Two for South Carolina, myself and Parker. We hope we're wrong, and we hope Oklahoma wins for y'all's sake. And 1 for Oklahoma with Travis Davidson. All right. That's going to do it for this version of the OU Insider Under the Visor Sooners pregame podcast. If you're not a member, subscribe to this YouTube channel. It's free. Subscribe to our podcast. It's free. We need it. Give us thumbs up, 5-star, whatever you got to do. It helps us get everything we need as far as getting more advertisers, all that type of stuff, so we can start working ourselves into the NIL game the way that we were trying to do. So please continue to hit that subscribe button so that you get notifications and are just up to date on everything that we drop, whether it's football, basketball, baseball, softball, or recruiting news right here on this channel, whatever channel you're listening to, podcast or YouTube. All right. Subscribe to OU Insider, $9.95 a month, $99.95 for the whole year. If you're a college student, .edu, email me, email Parker. You get us. We're at ouinsider@rivals.com. We will give you OU Insider for $11.95, but you got to email us from .edu. It doesn't matter what it is. If you have a .edu email us $11.95 for a whole year. We will send you the promo code. You get OU Insider. Again, email us ouinsider@rivals.com. For Travis Davidson, for Parker Thune, my name is Brandon Drum. That's going to do it for this version of the OU Insider Under the Visor Sooners Pregame Podcast. You guys have a blessed day.